What did you eat for breakfast?
That is a question I'm yet to answer.
Welcome to Music on Your Own Terms, the podcast that aims to help musicians develop an entrepreneurial mindset through interviews, as well as discussing resources, concepts, successes, and more. Providing a platform to talk about negative emotions such as anxiety and depression in order to help overcome them in the context of music and reduce the social stigma. This is episode 145.
This episode is sponsored by Ignite Your Music Career. You may remember in episode 90 I chatted to Ragdoll about sync licensing and how he makes a living through writing music for TV, video games, and film. Musicians all over the world subscribe to Ignite Your Music Career and earn more royalties, more upfront sync fees, and more recurring revenue from their music. Whether you're a composer, singer-songwriter, band, beatmaker, or instrumentalist, your music can be earning you more money. Internationally acclaimed composer, musician, and music educator Ragdoll has licensed his music in more than 1,000 TV show episodes, films, video games, and ads all over the world, and he will show you how you can too. Ignite gives you the information you need in a simple, accessible format, and you learn at your own pace. For just $6 a month, you get a video lesson each week on topics related to music licensing, from writing techniques to how to find your markets, and everything in between. You also get tools and activities to build the skills you need to be successful, and each lesson includes a royalty-free sound pack to download and use in your own music. The key to success in the music business today is to diversify your sources of revenue. Ignite will show you how. For more information or to subscribe to Ignite, visit the website at taris-studios.com or click the link on musiconyourownterms.com. I discovered this week's guest on YouTube while searching for videos of one of the amps I own, really appreciating the content he's putting out, as well as our common love for the band King's X. Leon Todd is a guitar player, YouTuber, and teacher from Perth, Australia, who tours with his band Ragdoll, teaches clinics at guitar festivals, and has a ton of great information on guitar gear, most notably the Fractal Axe FX. We discuss Leon's history, how he's built his YouTube channel, as well as his band's following around the world, including saving for trips to the US and taking every opportunity no matter what the odds they have faced as a band. Finally, Leon talks about the old adage of success is not what you know, but who you know, from his perspective, including how he met his wife and how he got to hang out and eat dinner with dUg Pinnick from King's X. If you enjoy the podcast and want to show your support, I'd be really grateful if you would consider signing up for the mailing list to stay in the loop with everything going on with the show. Just head over to musiconyourownterms.com and click the link. While you're there, you can also visit the store and grab some merch, or just buy me a coffee and help out with the running costs of the show. Thanks for listening. Welcome to another episode. Today I'm hanging out with Leon Todd, and I'll let him describe what he does. So welcome, and how you doing?
Yeah, very good, thanks. I make guitar noises, and I talk about myself a lot. So that's probably the most succinct summary of, I think, what I do and what most people on the internet know about what I do.
So you're a YouTuber, you're in a band called Ragdoll.
Correct.
You teach. The first question is, who inspired you to play guitar?
It's a very straightforward answer in some ways, and when you kind of dive into it, it's not very straightforward, but I grew up just kind of always assuming guitars were around because my dad played guitar. Not only did he play guitar, he built guitars as well. So there's a video of me when I'm about 3 years old careening about the house with a little quarter-sized Gibson replica, bossing all my cousins around, telling them that, no, you got to be the bass player and you got to be the drummer and we're going to do this concert. And so, yeah, I rewatched that video, kind of dug it up recently, and it all made sense. So that's probably the real reason that I was just kind of surrounded by this stuff from a very young age. But when I was maybe 12, 13, 14, I think like a lot of people my age really got into video games, and one of the biggest video games would have been like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So then we all decided we wanted to get into skateboarding, and then you have the ecosystem around skateboarding with a lot of, rock and punk and metal music that just kind of came hand in hand with that. So that's probably the stuff that really got me into music. And then it was that, oh, well, I got a guitar kicking around and I think I like music, and kind of hurts a little less than all the times I fall on concrete skateboarding. So yeah, when I was about 14 or 15, that's very much how I feel like I picked up a guitar one day and I haven't put it back down yet.
Nice. Yeah, so let's talk about Ragdoll. I've ascertained you've kind of been around for about 10 years, is that right?
Yeah, probably.
Give or take?
Give or take, yeah. It's one of those things where I'll probably be saying we've been around for 10 years for the next 7 or 8 years. But I first met our drummer Cam in 2006. And yeah, kind of the band that I joined that he was in eventually morphed into what's now Ragdoll. And we've had, a few different, I guess, lineups, you would say, while we were kind of playing around with the sound that we wanted to have. Maybe the first 5 or 6 years that he and I played together, we had different people come in and out of the band, but it would have been, probably about 10 years ago that we settled on a 3-piece lineup. So it's myself, I, make guitar noises, like I said, and our singer, Brian Rafferty, who plays bass as well. So classic power trio, someone's got to do 2 things. And like I was saying, our drummer Cam, who I've known, and probably is, the person I've known who plays music for the longest amount of time.
Fantastic. Yeah, so you've got that kind of, rock and roll, 80s influenced, and then obviously they've come up before on the podcast, King's X, the band that either you love them or you don't know about them. So
perfect.
So yeah, I mean, that's where we're going to start, I think, is just I think I just watched a video about where you got into King's X, like how fortunate to have family members that said, hey, listen to this. And it happens to be King's X.
Exactly. My uncle also plays music. He and my dad actually played in a couple of bands together back in the day. And he was the classic uncle that is, he just was an uncle. That's what uncles are meant to do. They're meant to show you that Van Halen is cool and King's X exist, and you can kind of listen to music that your mum and dad don't listen to. So that was very, very fortunate, and they are definitely one of those bands where they're like, it's like a secret society. Like you said, you either love it or you just haven't been introduced to it just yet. So they're probably one of the bands, obviously being a trio with a singing bass player who do a lot of really melodic stuff, but use drop tunings, but have a kind of, I guess, classic rock and metal sound, but also with like a kind of pop influence that I think really provided and I'm not saying that, we necessarily sound like them, but they kind of provide a template. It's like, hey, if you want to sound like all your favorite bands, you can do it. You don't have to just be stuck into these kind of little pigeonholes. So I think the really cool thing about King's X is, for a lot of people, they describe them as the Beatles meet Black Sabbath. And, a lot of people are influenced by both of those bands, but very few people would set out to put together a band that sounds like those two bands together. So for us, that was a good kind of template of like, hey, we like music from the 70s and the 80s, and we like all the kind of stuff from, I guess, the 90s and the post-grunge era, and a lot of modern stuff, and a lot of, just kind of eclectic music where it's like, okay, cool, well, it's all just music, and you're probably going to sound like you sound anyway, so just don't hold back with wanting to, you want to have a bridge of a song that sounds a little bit more like a pop song, do it. Who cares?
Right, for sure. So you've actually come over to the States. I'm jumping around a little bit, but
no, all good.
You've toured the States a couple of times. I mean, I know a lot of bands from Australia it's limiting just because of the cost, getting gear over and the plane tickets and stuff. Like, how have you gone about that? Are you getting label support, or is it like completely self-funded? Like, how are you working that?
So early on, when we started the band, we started doing a lot of, we call them like country shows, but it's not us playing country music. We're just playing in places that aren't the city. So we're in Western Australia, which has one kind of big city, Perth, where the majority of people live. And then you have this state that is 5 times the size of Texas and has very, very few people in it. So you have a lot of these towns with some will have a few thousand people. I think maybe the biggest one has about 50 or 60,000 people. And they're all somewhere within that like 5 to 6 hour driving radius. So when we started off, and it was kind of a good way to, I guess, learn our craft as a band, we would go and play shows where we primarily weren't playing in the city. So we were playing out of town, and we were mostly doing covers, and we were mostly doing 3 or 4 hour shows. So we were playing a lot, and we were earning money from those shows, and we were just kind of squirreling away all that money so that we could, if it was always a pipe dream, if the opportunity comes up where, we get a slot somewhere on, a gig in the US, we can go and do it, and we don't have to worry about the financial aspect of it. And in 2012, we got asked to go and play a side stage of a festival called Rocklahoma in the US. And, we got the invite in maybe February or March, and it was May that we were going to be over there. So that's how we initially started doing that. It was totally self-funded. We had no idea what was going on. We just kind of flew there. We didn't take any gear with us. I think once we kind of figured out that it was going to be prohibitive to ship any of our stuff over there, and that gear, relatively speaking, at the time, I think the exchange rate between the two currencies was about parity, was we could actually go and buy ourselves a bunch of stuff for far less than it would cost us to ship our own gear, or far less than it would cost us to hire gear. And, buying things is fun. So we just kind of showed up. We walked into a guitar center one day. We bought our entire backline. We stuffed it into one of those kind of Dodge Grand Caravans they have over in the States. And I think we played 9 or 10 shows that first time, but it was mostly exploratory. And we left all our gear with a friend who was very, very kind to just kind of let us stuff all our gear in his garage. And the next year we were asked back to play the same festival, but we knew what to expect this time. So about 9 months out, we were able to start booking shows and, figuring out logistics and all those kind of things. So that's still how we do everything. We don't have label support, and we don't have a manager, and we just kind of do it all ourselves. I think because now we have a pretty good idea of what not to do.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And then I did notice that your wife's from Texas, and I'm actually living in Texas. So how did you meet her? And I'm assuming your in-laws are now the storage facility.
Yes, that would be the correct assumption. That was obviously the relationship isn't predicated on storage facilities or anything like that. But yeah, we met in the second year that I went over. And again, I think this is one of the overlooked things when you talk to, there's a classic saying when you're young or starting out, where it's a cliche. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think a lot of people interpret that as like, well, you just got to be buddies with someone who has a few $1 million and a record label, and that's what they mean by who you know. When in reality, it's not. It can often just be somebody who you've met while you were setting up your gear at a gig, and it's maybe one of the other support bands, and they're just really friendly. So you become friends with someone, and they invite you over for a barbecue, and then you go to their barbecue and you have a great time with them, and you stay in touch, and then they say, oh, hey, you were saying at the barbecue that you were looking at somebody to do some photography or some film. You should speak to this person. And then nearly a decade later, you're married to that person living in another country. So I think that's kind of the who you know story. So I'm sure people could figure out from that a band we had played with and a guy who lives in Dallas, we just kind of became chummy, and we would go and hang out with him, and I would write to him quite often. And when we went over for that tour, I was looking for someone who could do some photos and some video work for us. And he suggested speaking to Elspeth, who was, she's from Texas and was living there and working at a music venue and doing photography and doing film stuff. And that's just kind of how we met. And, the rest is history.
That's awesome. I'm originally from England, so I moved to the US because of my wife.
There you go.
How she found living in Australia to be?
Very, very different. Obviously, being away from, you would understand this, just being away from your family is difficult, especially when you kind of feel like well, not just feel like you're on the other side of the world, when you are on the other side of the world.
Right.
But I think one of the big things with Australia, and you would know this coming from the UK as well, is, just there's enough similarities, but there's enough differences as well, I think, to make it interesting, to make it exciting, and to make it challenging with various things where, just like it's Sunday morning here, and, if the supermarket doesn't open for at least another hour, and it'll only stay open till 5 o'clock. So if you need some milk, you have to go out of your way to get that milk. Whereas, in the States, everything is open, and yeah, it's just weird little things like that I think do take time to get used to here. But, Australia's an amazing place to live, and I definitely appreciate that more. The longer I stay here, and the more other places that I've been lucky enough to visit, I guess.
Awesome. Let's dig into your history a little bit. You got a BA in science and maths, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So why did you do those? I was trolling your LinkedIn bio, and it's high honors, which, is pretty amazing. What prompted you to get those degrees and then go full on into music? Or was there a gradual transition where you were maybe teaching? Because I know you teach guitar, but were you tutoring? I saw something about tutoring. So was it a transition, or was it like, oh, I'm just doing music and I have that as a backup plan?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, the backup plan thing was not really something I ever thought about. And I think if I was going to have a backup plan, I would have just studied accounting or something like that, something that you can just kind of easily walk into a job, showing up and saying, oh, hey, yeah, I studied like entropy of group actions. Can you give me a job at your bank? Because I really, really need some money. Would probably just end up with a lot of people giving you a sideways look. But I, throughout school, I guess, so in Australia, I don't know if they use this term anymore, but I would be an advocate for them not using this term for a lot of reasons. But, when I was in like 6 or something like that, I was labeled as like a gifted student because, I don't know, I could kind of read books that maybe kids a few years older than me couldn't. And reading, if you're a kid, is like a superpower to me. I still see young kids, I'm talking about like kids who are between maybe like under the age of 8 or 9. Like if they figure out how to read pretty well, then it just seems like they just devour books and they just devour information. And I was one of those kids where, yeah, I just really got into reading, and I had books about space and dinosaurs and plate tectonics and, all this mind-blowing stuff that you don't hear about on Play School. So I was constantly just kind of devouring stuff like that. And I just consider like I could do most of my schoolwork pretty fast and pretty quickly. So there was definitely an element that as I, just kind of progressed through the grades, it was like, oh, hey, you're good at this, you should do some of this. So that was kind of it's very much the, I guess the norm core pathway is that like, if you get good grades, then you have to go to university. There's no two ways around it. The way university education works in Australia is you essentially, the government will let you essentially take out not an interest-free loan, but a loan that is just only, its value only increases with inflation. So essentially you get more or less an interest-free loan and you only have to start repaying it once you earn a certain amount of money. So they call that HEX here. Yep. And yeah, you just have this HEX program. So there's kind of like, you don't have to do the thing that you do in the States where it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to go and shop around for colleges and, I want a degree from somewhere, but it's going to cost X amount. So can I get a better thing somewhere else? It's just, oh, cool. Yeah. Well, you just go to, what's the university that offers what you want. So that's kind of what I did. And I really enjoyed maths and I really enjoyed physics. And I got a lot out of that experience both from like an academic perspective, and I think just from a kind of general life perspective, because it was the first time, and I think for a lot of people, universities are like this, it's the first time I was around people who were a similar age to me, where I was choosing to be around them, and that choice wasn't a byproduct of the fact that everyone I went to school with lived in a certain, their parents had chosen to live in a certain area. So that's why we all ended up at the same school, it wasn't I guess it wasn't just a purely like socioeconomic factor that I had people the same age around me. This was people from not only everywhere in the kind of state or city that I live in, but all around the country and people from overseas as well. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. I didn't do a whole lot of like overt socializing, but a lot of the people that I met in my classes, I still stay in touch with a couple of them. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I think when I finished my honors, which was really, really good fun, the pathway is like, hey, you did pretty good at this. Like you should, do you want to become an academic? Do you want to do a doctorate? And right around that time, I had met the guys in the band, and it was a pretty simple calculation to me. It's like, cool, I'm 21, 22 years old. You only get to be that old once. Do I try the band thing now? And then if I don't like it, when I'm 10, 20 years older, I can go back to university and do the thing I was going to do. I don't think it quite works the other way around, unfortunately.
Right.
So it was just very much a, maybe one of the few rational decisions I've ever made in my life. And I've been teaching guitar since I was about 15 or 16. When I was at uni, I was also tutoring the stuff that I was studying. So that kind of gave me a little bit of leeway there, where it's like, well, if I'm not making a whole amount of money out of the band, I can still kind of get by teaching and tutoring. So there's the long version of the story.
No, that's fine. I noticed you've done some session work with some Australian singers that maybe were tied to the X Factor and Australian Idol. Is that right?
Yeah. So, and again, this is friend of a friend kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. One of my good family friends who, for a brief period of time, actually was managing Ragdoll, his wife is involved in like corporate events. So she worked with a lot of, artists who were involved with, Sony and the whole X Factor kind of thing. So I think they had somebody come out where they needed somebody to play like 3 songs on acoustic guitar. And so, so they just suggested me. And then through kind of word of mouth, I ended up doing, this would have been maybe 2013 through to about 2016. I just kind of became the guy that, you could call two days before and, I could learn 3 pop songs in a day, and then show up on time and, not smell too bad or swear too much. So I kept getting those gigs, which was really fun, kind of figuring out that, the people that you see on TV are people first and foremost. And everybody that I worked through there was super professional and just like genuinely decent people to work with. So that was really, really awesome.
Awesome. I found you via YouTube because I was just searching for random, videos about the amp I have, which is a Carvin V3.
Awesome.
And I found your channel, and I actually just talked to a guy. So if you're ever in England, if you ever find yourself in the south of England, I've got a good friend who is a really great luthier.
Awesome.
Eastbourne Guitar Workshop, and he actually told me this week that you were one of the channels that convinced him to buy, I think it was the FM3, or what's just come out for the Fractal stuff. Is it the FM3?
FM3 and FM9 they have, so
it might have been the 9.
Yeah, right. No, I that's probably a not too uncommon story. I think a lot of people would know me on the internet through the whole Fractal ecosystem, and then I like guitar amps and I like loud noises as well. So one of the ways I got into doing YouTube stuff was, I like watching YouTube. So I'd be on there and I'd be like, oh, I wonder if anyone's done a video about my amp, and, like a Carvin V3 is maybe a bit of an underrated kind of unit, but I have one. And, I'd look up, this was before I started doing YouTube, and I'd be like, I can't believe there's no videos of this thing. You might get the 2-minute promotional thing from the company that somebody had ripped off like a DVD or VHS, but nothing else. And that's kind of what got me started, where I was like, well, I have microphones, and, my wife does photography, and I can use her camera on video mode, and maybe I should just mic up my guitar amp and talk about it a little bit and upload the video to YouTube. And I started doing that. And, people who who have seen my YouTube channel know that I have a lot of stuff. So as I started posting videos and getting some feedback on it, it just kind of became this interesting opportunity to like, hey, I have all this stuff. Maybe if I just try to do one video with each thing, then that would be a fun little project. And then it has just kind of snowballed from there. So yeah, I am in the position now where I guess having a channel, which is, I mean, I never even thought of doing YouTube stuff as something that you could be successful at. I just kind of went in with the intention of like, oh, well, I'll make videos about things that I like, and that'll be fun. And it still is very fun to me, but now it is something that takes up, you know, a considerable portion of my time during the week, and it's something that I do make money from in various ways, and it is something that kind of, I guess, justifies and offsets and fuels the fact that I like guitar stuff as well. So it's kind of become its own little self-perpetuating machine.
Awesome. How long, you know, how many videos do you average a week, and how much time, you know, during the week do you actually spend on it?
So at the moment, I mean, I do a video every day. I don't know how long I can keep this up, but I've kept it up for a few years and it's been pretty interesting. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to anybody, but I have so many different things that I'm interested in when it comes to the whole guitar space that essentially every single day of the week I have a different, you know, I tend to do it weekly where like, you know, today's Sunday, so I've got a video scheduled, which is just me playing some music, like just me playing guitar for a few minutes. And normally I'll do like a deep dive thing with a piece of gear on Saturday, and Friday I do a Q&A video, and Monday I'll do a review, and Thursday it'll be a guitar lesson or something. So I do have this kind of structure around things, and I found that having a balance between longer form videos, you know, 20 to 40 minutes that people can kind of, I guess, watch like a TV show, and then short and sharp, like 5-minute videos where it's like, hey, here's how to play this John Sykes lick, or like, here's how to set up something on the Axe FX that makes your delays spin around your head, has been a really good format for me. So yeah, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, you know, it's probably realistically between about 10 to 20 hours a week. But you know, that's time that I'd be sitting around picking my nose otherwise. So it kind of keeps me busy, and it keeps me in that cycle where it's still a creative thing. You know, I found I love playing in a band. Like, I love playing in a band. I love playing with the guys I play with. It's just that the creative cycle with it is a little bit longer, where, you know, there's songs that we worked on the first demo for when we first started the band 10 years ago that are still kind of kicking around in the background, where you know, they didn't get finished for whatever reason, or they didn't make the cut for an album or an EP, but you know, they're not terrible songs. Maybe we'll get around to finishing them. And the last full-length album that we did, we were in that situation where we needed one more song, and it was sort of like, hey, why don't we rework this, you know, essentially demo recording that never made it onto anything else. And it was one of those processes where, like, in a day, went from being this crusty old idea to being a brand new thing that we could put on the end of an album. But you need that. That was because, hey, we're a song short. The album's got to come out in a month. We need to do this thing. And yeah, it's just it's a slow burn. It's satisfying in a different way. Whereas doing a video means that kind of every single day I can make something. And that is something I like to do.
So I know you've had the opportunity to go to, is it Axe Fest?
Yeah.
What other opportunities have come out of the channel?
Oh, quite a lot. I was just down at the Western Australian Guitar Festival. They did their second one this year. So I did some workshops and some clinics down at that. And when so the last tour we did with Ragdoll, we did an East Coast we did an Australian tour. But it was mostly on the East Coast because that's where most of the big cities are. And that was in March. So right around the time the whole COVID thing was really kicking off. I also did on the back of that, I was able to do some workshops and some teaching. And one of the really interesting things that's come up because of it is now most of the teaching I do is online. So most of my students are in the United States and the UK or over on the East Coast of Australia. And you know, it literally couldn't have come at a better time, especially with what's happened over the last 2 years. So I was really, really fortunate that having a presence online meant that it would have been March or April last year where I was kind of sitting around. I was like, well, I physically can't be in a room with any of my students. So all my existing students I'm teaching online, maybe I'll just put the word out that this is something that I do. And yeah, I've been able to kind of transition most of my teaching business over to being online relatively painlessly.
Yeah, I basically had the same experience. Even the kid that is right round the corner from me just started teaching online, and I actually found it a little easier because then I could set up a second camera showing my fretboard and then record the lesson, so I don't have to write an email over like do this, this, and this. I'm just like, here's the video. Go listen to the end of the video for your homework.
Exactly. I enjoy that aspect of it where there's a lot of long-standing technical issues around how to, make the 30 minutes or the 60 minutes or however long it is that you're with a student, make that really sustainable. So I have enjoyed where it's like, you're on a Zoom meeting and you can just say, hey, hit the record button because I'm going to show you what your homework is. Done. Or another cool thing that I like with that is, it's transcribing music is obviously a great way to further your musicianship. So you can give someone some homework where it's like, hey, I'm going to play something. You can record it, and then it's your homework to transcribe it and play it back to me next time. So yeah, a lot of fun things like that. And the other aspect out of it is I've seen us sell merch for the band in places that we haven't played before online, which is always exciting, and in just kind of different markets. So I'm kind of waiting with bated breath to see, if and when the world opens up, if we'll have any opportunities to go to maybe some countries we haven't been to before and do some really fun touring. And the other thing is I love guitar gear, so getting to work with some of my favorite companies has been amazing, really, really great, and often have them approach you because they like what you do.
That's great. So this might be a bit of a rabbit hole.
Let's go.
So I really appreciate your videos because you're really positive and you do have a really nice spin on things. But I just watched your Plex videos, and so for non-guitar players, the Plex system is basically a super accurate system that scans your guitar and finds out where all the inaccuracies in the setup are. And it's one of those things where I do like your April Fool's ones for the tube scent, and I can really feel that for the purists. But
oh yeah,
I love the video because it's like, hey, this is what it does. This is what if it's another tool that tells the luthier what to fix. And it's not going to make a crappy luthier good. It's not going to make a good luthier bad. It's a tool. And I love that about that kind of attitude about amps in general and guitars in general. The rabbit hole is, do you think that, there's so much misinformation online, and there's a lot of these, let's call them trolls that say, oh, it's not a 69 Les Paul, so it's no good, all this crap, and guitar does, the wood doesn't affect the guitar tone, which we know is crap. I seen that a lot of the videos now, it's still a lot of snake oil in the guitar industry, and it's perpetuating sales. Like PRS, Paul has always said he started the guitar company to make tools for working musicians, and at the beginning, that's what it was. Like, you go to Nashville and they won't use anything else because the PRS guitars stayed in tune. But I think over time, it's kind of evolved into this lifestyle brand where you see brain surgeons and people with a lot of money buying these ridiculously beautiful guitars, but they're not really using them as tools. They're using them as like furniture. So, like, what's your take on that? Do you think there's just too much online now?
I mean, I would probably argue that there's too much noise online with everything.
That's fair.
And the best thing that anyone can do is, like, you're gonna have social media, but you don't have to have all of them. I deleted my Twitter account right at the start of the pandemic because I was like, hey, I know I am just gonna be like rage tweeting and watching people rage tweet about stuff. I don't need that in my life. I can actually live without it. But, YouTube, which I guess is like a social media company as well, I like watching videos about interesting stuff. I like making videos. And like I said, I had a huge upswing because everybody was stuck at home. So my kind of very minuscule cut of ad revenue went up a little bit, which was a kind of hidden benefit. But I'll answer that question in a roundabout way, where this is something that pops up with a lot of my students, where no matter what level they're at, I'll hear now I don't want to be a professional musician, but I would like to become a better guitar player, which I think is a long-standing attitude where it's like that there is maybe only certain roads to legitimacy if you want to self-identify as a guitar player or a musician. And I mean, the thing that I watched the movie Coco with my wife the other day, which is a lovely movie and everybody should watch, especially if you like guitars, because it's about the guitar. But, there's a great line in there where it's like, one of the main characters says to the main character, it's like, oh, you play guitar? Are you a musician? And he's sort of like, well, he's like, no, come on. Like you play, you're a musician. This is how it is. And I think that's a reality. I think you don't have to just go and do gigs, or you don't have to be recording music, or you don't have to be writing music to consider yourself a musician. Often that's just a label that we kind of stick on stuff. People who don't even play an instrument are musicians. Some of the most influential musicians on the planet can't actually operate instruments, which is totally fine. So, if you're a doctor or a lawyer and, you participate in the economy and you want to buy a $20,000 PRS and never play it and just stick it on your wall, go for it. That's not affecting me really in any other way. So I understand where some of those, it makes sense if your guitar brand is going to cater to that market. One thing that I like about a company like PRS is their cheaper guitars are actually really good. Mm-hmm. They found a way to, they might manufacture some of the guitars overseas. They might use slightly different parts, but fundamentally it's a guitar you can go and do a gig with. So I think it's one of those things where, it used to be that you could buy a Les Paul for a few $100 and you can go and gig it for 50 years and suddenly you have this thing that's worth $100,000 because of lots of different things. So yeah, I don't really try to worry too much about decisions other people make about their lives and what they want to do with their money. I just like to play. I know what I like, and what I like isn't necessarily for everybody, but I know that I like it. So that's kind of more what I focus on as a guitar player, which rather than, and so with the channel, tying into the channel as well, I would say that that's if I come across as excessively positive, it's hopefully not a kind of naive positivity. It's actually that like, hey, yeah, there's lots of stuff going on, but what can you control? Maybe a few things about your mental state and maybe a few decisions that you get to make. So focus on those and try to optimize those.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, yeah, to your point, I have an older Zach Myers SE.
Oh, that's one of the best ones.
I have gigged multiple times, and I think I changed the nut to a USA nut and some locking tuners, but outside of that, it's stock. So that's been gigged quite a bit. It's got some dings on it.
Yeah, well, that's funny you bring that up because my main PRS, which is a single cut that I bought in 2014 in Texas, which is like my favorite guitar ever. The thing that I changed on that was it didn't come with locking tuners. It's a USA-made PRS, but for whatever reason on their kind of, more vintage-inspired instruments, they don't put the locking tuners. But I love locking tuners, so I swapped them out. So, you have a guitar that I got really lucky where it was on sale because they were clearing out all the pre-2013 stuff. But, with a guitar that probably listed for thousands of dollars or a guitar that doesn't list for thousands of dollars, and you're going to do the same modification to it anyway.
Yeah, totally. If it's not going to be too long of a story...
Hey, I can't make that promise, but I'll tell it anyway.
What was your meeting dUg story?
That was really, really interesting. So a friend of mine runs an online magazine, a rock website, and they've done pretty well where I think they've kind of met every single rock star they've ever wanted to meet in their life. And they do a lot of reviews and a lot of interviews, and they're constantly busy with it. So it sort of popped up that I think it would have been around the time that they did the KXM album. So George Lynch, Doug Pinnick, Ray Luzier, awesome band, awesome album. So yeah, this would have been 2014, and they sent me a message and said, "Hey, I've got an interview request and a review request for this KXM album that's coming out. I know you love King's X. Do you want to, write up some questions, or do you want to do the phone interview with Doug?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds awesome." So I did the interview, and I just got chatting to Doug, and he's a wicked dude, and we were just kind of talking about music a lot, and Doug was just kind of like, "Oh, so obviously you play music, like you're in a band, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, actually, we're going to be in LA in about 2 months. So this is just me hamming it up." I was like, yeah, we're going to be over there. We like King's X, if you're around, let me know. And he was like, yeah, cool. Sounds really good. Here's my email. And I'm just thinking the whole time like, he's just being nice. So then fast forward a few months, and we were at our hotel in LA, and I was like, we had a night off. And I said to our drummer, I was like, "Oh, should I email this guy? How funny would it be to, kind of hear back from him?" He was like, "Yeah, you should do it." So I send Doug an email, and he immediately gets back to me. He's like, "Oh, awesome. Welcome to America. What do you want to do? You want to hang out? You want to go and get dinner or something?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds pretty good." So he's like, "Cool, I'll be there in an hour. Send me the address of your hotel." And he shows up in his big truck, walks into the lobby, and, one of those people where you just kind of see them and you go like, no, you're a rock star. Like, you just have that thing, just the way you are, your general presence. And picked us up, and I think we went and ate ribs at like Universal Studios or something and hung out and just had story time with Uncle Doug. It was a really awesome experience to meet somebody who obviously I'd listened to a lot of their music and, kind of grown up musically listening to it, and to just have a very very normal interaction with them, where they're just, again, a person with a lot of stories to tell.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I really appreciate about them. Every gig I've ever been to, it's always a meet and greet. Like, they will stay there until the last person comes out the building. I haven't actually managed to get into one because
yeah, right,
the wife was sick at one gig, and like we were out of state or whatever. But I did see. So two quick stories. My first live gig with King's X was opening for Dream Theater and Satriani on the it would have been the 6 Degrees tour and the Strange Beautiful Music tour, if I'm not mistaken.
Both excellent albums.
I mean, we were right at the back of the it was like an outdoor venue in Boston. Absolutely blew me away from the stage, like the sound coming up. Given that I think that was my first Dream Theater show and my third Satriani show, I think. Just like they coming away from that experience was just like, oh my God. And I got to see Doug sing Lines in the Sand with Dream Theater as well.
Yeah.
So I did get to meet Ty, and so I saw the Jelly Jam in Boston.
Oh, awesome.
And I got to meet Ty, John Myung, and Rod Morgenstein, which that was the most mind-blowing show ever. But yeah, like Ty got John Myung to do a meet and greet.
Yeah, wow. That's something.
at a Boston thing. That's something significant. But let's move on to the non-quickfire question round, because I know we're a bit limited on time now. What significant negative experience have you overcome, and what did it teach you?
Oh, I like that question. That's a good one. They're the questions you want to hear. I would say that one, we'll start with the lesson first. I think a lot of negative experiences I've really learned from have been because I've been the instigator of the negative experience. But because we're talking about music and we're talking about bands and stuff like that, one that immediately comes to mind is, I would still chalk it up as one of the best tours we've done. Very nearly didn't happen because we had the classic dodgy booking agent where, we've booked you 30 shows in the States, and we got about 3 shows in, and turns out none of the venues even knew who we were or where we were meant to be, and never heard back from the agent. And yeah, we had this situation where it's like, well, do we just kind of not do anything, and do we just fly home? Because it's pretty terrifying to be spend all this time and effort and money to get yourself somewhere, and you're just looking at like 10 weeks of nothing in another country. You don't know where you're meant to stay. You don't know really anything about what you possibly could do. And it was literally just like the kind of three of us in the band. We had a van that we had hired, and we had some gear. And yeah, that was terrifying for a couple of days, because we were seriously considering just, packing it and coming home. And that probably would have been the end of going to the States and touring. But we decided that given we might never get that opportunity again, we just started calling and cold calling a lot of venues and calling everyone we knew that we had ever met over there to just see if they could help out. It's like, hey, here's the story. We had shows booked. We had them pulled. We're from Australia. We're in America. Do you reckon you could help? If you can't help, could you pass us on to somebody else? So that's something that when it initially happened, we were all really down about and pretty bitter about. But I think the thing that we learned from it was, it's like, yeah, there is absolutely no opportunity cost in asking for help. Mm-hmm. And this applies to so much stuff outside of, the band and music, and something that I really try to apply all the time to a lot of different things, whether, whether I'm trying to buy a pair of shoes and I can't make up my mind. And so I can just talk to the person behind the desk and say, hey, could you maybe give me a hand? Which a lot of the time now, especially in Australia, it's like attendants seem to just kind of leave you alone, and you have that experience of like, oh, maybe I can go into the shop and I can buy something. I just have to say, hi, where do I scan my card? But yeah, it very much just boils down to that, like if the opportunity cost is zero, take the opportunity.
Fantastic. What major positive experience has given you the push to follow this journey?
Again, probably just people. I think I'm somebody who naturally likes to focus on like being grateful about positive experiences that you've had. So I don't like to dwell on negative experiences, but I do like to remember them and try to get driven by them, or try to learn from them. Because if you learn from your negative experiences, you might have some more positive experiences. So yeah, one of the goals that I had, I think when I left uni and started playing music, that I would love to tour, whatever that means. And I would love to record some of my own songs with my friends in the band. And I consider just, having had the opportunity to do that at least once a massively positive experience. And then to have that happen in a somewhat haphazard yet sustainable fashion has been kind of icing on the cake.
Fantastic. Last question is, what does music mean to you?
Life. In a lot of different ways. It's obviously something that I dedicate a lot of my time to, but I'll qualify this by saying that I'm in no way qualified to talk about the specifics of this, but there is something in that I really, really like the idea of, and when I first read about it, that in several Indigenous Australian cultures, there's this idea of, it's like a rite of passage. So I'm sure a lot of casual listeners, if they don't know much about Australia, they know about the outback and they know about walkabout. But it essentially is, in a lot of Indigenous cultures, there are these things called songlines. And you could think of a songline as like a ritual journey that somebody has to undertake in a particular part of their life. I'm probably massively misrepresenting this, but one thing that stuck with me is, they're called a songline because you go and you go out and you walk and you follow these predetermined locations, but the way you remember how to navigate is via verse and via song, and these songs are tied to the pace of walking. And the idea is that you have to go out into the world and you have to sing the world back into being. You have to sing the world back into being regenerated. So it's a lot of things. It's a rite of passage. It's a creation story. It's singing. it's doing all these kind of things. So I really, really like that idea of music being so fundamental to kind of our understanding of the world. And there's a lot of, I think, speculation that, humans could probably sing. We probably started singing before we started talking. So singing is like really embedded embedded in the roots of language. And, you often hear the thing that music is a universal language. But I don't really think it's a universal language because you have a lot of things in, formalized music which are not universal across cultures. But I would probably make the argument that like singing is fundamental to some of the languages that we use that we consider universal. So yeah, I like to think that's one way I really like to think about music. And yeah, outside of that, it's just a nice thing. It's a nice way to spend your limited time on Earth.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much. So if people want to get in touch, listen to your music, check out your YouTube channel, where do they go?
Well, I guess if you want to check out some of the YouTube channel, you can go to YouTube. You can look for me, Leon Todd, and I'm on all the social media platforms as Leon Todd. The best place if you wanted to listen to some Ragdoll music or purchase some Ragdoll music or purchase some of our merch is our Bandcamp store, which is ragdollrock.bandcamp.com. We're also all over the social media channels. So yeah, if you give it a listen and you hear something that you like, either write to me. Probably Instagram is probably the place I can actually, respond to you the easiest. I also have a Discord server as well, again, which is just Leon Todd. That's been a really nice thing that's kind of built up quite organically. But yeah, I love to hear from people wherever they are. And, if they kind of feel touched by music in the same way that I do, I always like chatting to them.
Cool. All right. And then at the end of the episode, I do like to play a track by the artist I'm talking to. So what song can we play?
What would be a good one? Maybe we'll do one of the more recent singles that we release. We'll do one called Rust.
All right. Well, this has been absolute pleasure. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Likewise, mate. Great set of questions.
Thank you. So please, stay in touch and talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, as this really helps get the word out about the podcast, so other musicians can benefit from the awesome knowledge that my guests are sharing. The more the musicians community collectively learns, the stronger we will become. A rising tide lifts all ships. This episode is sponsored by the Skinny Armadillo Printing Company in Fort Worth, Texas, offering a full range of apparel decoration and promotional items such as screen printing, embroidery, laser engraving, and much more. The Skinny Armadillo is now offering a merch fulfillment service including on-demand printing and a custom-built web store so you can concentrate on your music and running your business as a musician. Visit theskinnyarmadillo.com or call 817-546-1430 to learn how the Skinny Armadillo can help you take your merch to the next level. Keep pushing the needle and be excellent to each other. This is Ragdoll with Rust.